So the topic says key elements to look before investing, especially focusing on healthcare and non-healthcare. So we have three personalities here who've been on the spectrum of investing in various projects, or I would say investors fraternity. So we'll have a few questions to the panelists, and then we'll open the house for the questions. So my first question to all of you is that there's a saying that a lot of people, a lot of investors look for an innovative idea. At the same time, not every innovative idea can become successful. They say it's a lot about execution capacity or energy to execute. Now, when people look to invest in a company, which one is the key element? Is that an idea or the management team? Which comes first? Maybe I'll start with Mr. Anand.
So to answer your question, basically I would like to ask all of you to go through the site, Google, and come up with a book. There's a book called What They Don't Teach You at Harvard. I repeat, the title is What They Don't Teach You at Harvard. And so I went through that book. It was quite a revelation for me. And in that book it clearly says, and basically that is the mantra also for investments, is that if you have two types of company with management which is class A, but a product with class B, versus a company with management class B, versus a product which is class A, clearly go for that which has got a management which is class A. And I'll tell you why I say this is because in my own life, I've been in the business of investments for the last 18 years. I have invested in 60 startups so far. And I will continue to make another 30-40 investments before I retire. So I want to basically see the number 100 investments in my life before I retire completely. Or I can share with you live studies or live examples, and these are not basically picked up from BCG or from McKinsey. This is actually from my own life. I started investing in 1998-99, and I've seen several examples in my life, be it from US, be it from Europe, be it from Asia, India and China. Having traveled to almost like 150 countries across the globe, that it is the people who make the difference. It's the people who make the business plan. It's the people who basically create the planning process. It's the people who handhold each other during difficult times. It's the people who basically celebrate with each other when there is a successful journey. So clearly the answer to this question is invest in people, not in business plans, not in innovative ideas. Innovative ideas will follow. And I'll give you one example. There is a biotech company called Genentech. I'm not sure how many people are aware with this company called Genentech. Genentech is a company which was born in 1976 in San Francisco. The company was born because of a call that was made by a banker, a venture capitalist. He called a professor from UCSF, University of California, San Francisco, where he read a very interesting article published by the scientist. And the article was on DNA splicing, cutting of genes basically, and for mixing them to come up with new products. So he called the scientist. The scientist said, let's meet together at Churchill Bar over a beer. And that's how Genentech took its birth. And the starting investor or the seed investor in this company was Kleiner Perkins, who invested $100,000. The company was born in a garage in San Francisco. And in 2009, this company called Genentech was bought by Roche. So it was sold to Roche for 90 billion US dollars. 90 billion US dollars. So from 1976 to 2009, when the company was sold for $90 billion, it has gone through lots of ups and downs. But then what remained consistent is basically the founder who was there with the company, and he shares a lot of experiences. So he's now come up with a book called Genentech. That's the second book I'll advise all of us to go through, Genentech, which basically talks about how people make business plans and success stories. Thank you.
So thanks for the information, Anand. I have a very bad throat, so please bear with me. Two things I would like to say here are innovation and execution. Both are equally important. If you don't have an innovative idea, trust me, the execution probably will be difficult, and vice versa. Why execution is important, even if the idea is not very superior, is because the way you take the product to an end. So we have been seeing a lot of companies coming to us to talk to us about what their products are, how they are going to execute, and stuff like that. But the key is who are the people behind, as Anand rightly said, who are the people behind the company, who are the people behind the idea, at what level the idea has to reach. All these things needs to be decided really quickly at the initial stage, and only then can a good foundation can be actually parked, and they can take the entire thing with a synergy to a next level. So yes, I will agree on one fact that innovation and execution both are equally important. They go hand in hand.
I think it also depends on the type of the industry. You have the technology-based or service-based industry, or a infra, real estate. So where the investment is becomes like infra or real estate, or those kind of projects, the investment cycle is larger and the investment required is bigger. And whereas the technology-based or the service-based, the idea on the people are most important. But even the large investment projects like infra, or on this kind of a, where it has a large business cycle and investment is more, it's at the end of the day, it is the business model and the flexibility on the business model to go through the challenging situations, and the team to really stick on to, because business plans are business plans. What happens tomorrow, actually, we don't, envisage. But we, as a team, we should be able to really understand the challenges, and when the challenges come, you should be able to guide through it and pass through it. So it is especially in Indian context, the challenges are much more than the US, and also Indian context in the infrastructure, and where the regulatory approvals, regulatory issues are more, is much more challenging than in a pharma or a tech-based the startups which are coming more now.
All right, thanks a lot. On that note, I have a question to you. So, you've been in the ecosystem, you're also an author of a book. I'd like to understand what do you think are the key elements for an entrepreneur to think about, or he probably has jotted down before he goes out and says that this is what the capital that I require from his business. So, can you throw some light in all of your experience?
See, the entrepreneurship is something, it's a unique, you cannot, once if you take up the entrepreneurship as a line, it's mostly people come from the professional background, they're working in an organization and become an entrepreneur. Or they have an idea and, they have somebody said we'll give you money and, we'll back you, and they come up with start a company, or they're born with a silver spoon and, the second generation, third generation entrepreneurs. I think the most critical element is, one is you need to have the, general things like that, the marketing, the finance, the product, the technology, all those elements, have to be clearly understood, and the financing model, business model, what are the risks. But most important thing is you need to prepare for a failure. Yeah, all businesses are not successful, So how do you really, when whatever you plan doesn't happen, what is that the capacity you have to withstand that, and not to, get worried about it. And that is that's the entrepreneur, he has to stay there, it's for a professional, you can look for another job, but entrepreneur, he has to stay there. That's one of the very critical element. Apart from that, other, you have the marketing plan, business plan, the financial plan, and, getting a long-term capital or a short-term capital, mismatch of the cash flows, all that has to be there one side. Even then, sometimes, if a business risk is there, you should be able to, basically, when the failure happens, you should be able to tackle it than the success.
Right. So, well, your answer states very much about the risk abilities of the entrepreneur. So, you're also talking about the Indian ecosystem, the challenges faced. So, we have Anand here who comes from an ecosystem that's well matured in the world, like Singapore, and now it's been focusing in India and have a big plans for India. I have a question to you, Anand. So, what do you think are the 2 cents for entrepreneurs while actually they go for fundraising, especially in healthcare and medtech for India, or mostly focusing on Indian entrepreneurs?
So I think the most important thing for an Indian entrepreneur, for that matter for an entrepreneur who's getting into healthcare journey, is he needs to have clarity of the innovation that he's working on. Ask yourself a very simple question. Do you have a problem for which you're finding a solution, or you have a solution for which you're finding a problem? Most of the times it's actually a scenario whereby you have a solution and you say that, okay, one day you get this eureka moment and you can go and tell your parents and your friends that, look, I'm going to become a businessman, I'm going to become the next Anil Ambani or Mukesh Ambani or Ratan Tata, so on and so forth. It doesn't happen like that. You actually have to look at what the problem is. You have to look at the market size of the problem. You have to look at basically how important is that problem, and whether the solution that you're going to work for that problem, is there going to be investors, funders, who are going to come forward and say that, yes, this solution is something which is innovative, we want to invest in this solution. And I'll give you an example. We have invested, in fact, as I told you, I've invested in 60 startups so far. So I'll give you the very first startup that I invested in. This was in India, I'm talking about. So when I was actually visiting, this is a company in Hyderabad. And the company manufactures gabapentin. Gabapentin is an antidepressant, and they also have technology to manufacture Celexa. Celexa is also basically a multi-billion-dollar drug. And the company basically spoke about process innovation, and they were speaking about challenging the innovators. So India basically was in the field of generic manufacturing, challenging innovators in Europe. And they said that they can do it much better than the Europeans. I did my due diligence on the company. The company was pretty good in its organic chemistry. They didn't have any, knowledge about how to commercialize it internationally, but they were very confident of the technology. And what happened eventually is that they got a CEO who was very dynamic in business making. And he went on basically finding solutions inorganically. And he went on basically acquiring companies abroad. And eventually it was a fantastic team of basically a CEO who had the deal making capabilities and a team which was very strong technically. And that was a winning combination. The company was acquired by a large US pharmaceutical company for $1.1 billion. And that was my first $1 billion exit that I got out of a company based in Hyderabad. So when I visited that company, okay, I'll tell you, it's a real-time story. When I visited the company, the lift was shaking. I was not sure what kind of a building they were and what kind of a company it was. So I realized that to invest, okay, first of all, a good investment will never come walking to you. You have to go to that particular good investment and you have to assess it. You have to look at basically the opportunity that is there in front of you. You look at the data. I spent a good 6 months looking at the data, and only when I was convinced, I invested in that company. Okay, so the answer to your question is basically for a very successful healthcare startup, especially in the Indian context, clearly you should be very strong intellectually or technologically. You should have some barrier to entry. Without a barrier to entry, it's a bit difficult for you to sustain in the game of innovation. That's number one. Number two, it's very different compared to the kind of startups that you see. Today, you come up with a mobile app, you are called a startup entrepreneur. You come up with basically, sometimes I wonder, why did I study so much if I had to make money by selling onions and tomatoes online? So you can actually make money by selling onions and tomatoes online and be a service provider. So ask yourself a simple question. If you are in the business of healthcare investments, you have to be disruptive. You got to have a technology, you got to have a solution which will be basically assessed and required by the market. And eventually then you come up with your business plan.
That's very elaborate. Thanks a lot. So Devaki, coming to you. So at GREX, you might have been dealing with administrative fraternity in India. So what do you think is the sentimental analysis from the standpoint of the key elements these investors looking, especially for Indian entrepreneurs, to in healthcare?
Sure. So, we have been looking at a lot of things. Okay, when investors come talk to us, when we come talk to them.
Maybe I think it will help the audience if what the GREX is a little bit.
Oh, okay. So GREX is, we are trying to build an exchange for the unlisted companies. What we are trying to do is what NSC is doing for the public limited companies, we are trying to do the same for the unlisted piece, the private limited companies. Now, the idea of doing this was basically to enhance the entrepreneurs on the right side. We wanted to lift the entrepreneurs and take them to a level wherein they can actually come on the platform, look at the investors, get their product and their company on the platform, and the investors should invest in these companies. Now, these are high growth companies which we are looking at. We are looking at curated companies which come on the platform, innovative, curated, and we make them due diligently ready for the investors to invest in. Idea here is to attract good entrepreneurship. Idea here is to attract, again, a good idea in terms of product and other things. So this is about GREX. When we talk to the investors, certain investors do come with a mindset that they want to ideally invest into a mobile app company or a pharmaceutical company or a healthcare company. Now, healthcare in India is differentiated into various things. A company which is providing medical health checkups is also a healthcare company, if you look at it on a broader side. Now, Porsche, right? I mean, which is that company? Porsche, yeah. So they are also into healthcare. What they do is they send the physiotherapists at your place and they book an appointment for your doctors. So these are again getting into healthcare. But when we talk about certain companies, there are certain companies on the Ayurvedic medicine side which are coming up now on, they are talking to us on getting certain ailments cured. I think in the last panel, I forgot his name, I'm sorry. He was talking about certain medicine, right, which can cure, your cough and cold through, a very simple medicine. So we are actually getting inquiries on those lines. We are having investors who are wanting to invest into the healthcare part of India. Now, we have to literally decide, or India or the investors need to grow on the that side, that how they want to look at healthcare as as probably a product, whether they want to invest into a pharma company, whether they want to invest into a healthcare provider company and stuff. So yeah, there are companies which are we are looking at companies in the healthcare space. We have I think shortlisted around 3 or 4 which will come on the platform in the near future. And we do have a stipulated audience or investors who are specifically looking into those areas. So yeah, I think if that answers your question. Another thing which I would like to urge all of you sitting here is to probably just go visit our website and see how best you yourselves can be good investors in the near future, because we are looking at any individual, any retail investor who can invest anything between 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs or 15 lakhs in a startup and probably make your bit there, make your quick buck. because we are looking at getting curated and good startups on the platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So before I have a couple of questions, I would like to open this house for discussion, questions from the audience. Can you pass on the mic?
But the question is like this. India is such a big country. The last 60 years, even a small country like Spain, leave alone US, leave alone other parts of the big countries, Spain has come out with 56 molecules. Whereas in India, we have not even come out with one. You know, we were talking about healthcare and innovation, but in terms of absolute drug discovery, a country like India with vast potential has not come out even with one single molecule. What is the reason and what is your solution after having such a good experience in healthcare?
See, I studied in IIMS, All Institute of Medical Sciences. I was a topper in the university. I got a chance to be in the best medical institute in India. I left India 25 years back. I visited IIMS recently, and I've seen that nothing has changed, especially when it comes to drug discovery, drug development, when it comes to basically the interdisciplinary processes between clinicians and scientists, or basically. So what fundamentally, and I was talking to my teachers why it has not changed, because you see the thing is, in the West, you have this beautiful marriage between academicians, scientists, businessmen, venture capitalists, clinicians, all in an ecosystem. Like if you go to Boston, right? How many of you have been to Massachusetts, Boston? Okay, when you go to Boston, what do you see there? If you go to this place called Kendall Square or Harvard Square, you will actually see MIT. You'll have about 30 to 40 or maybe 50 venture capitalists in a building next to MIT. And on the right hand side, then you see Harvard Square, that's Harvard University. And then you have a train station. Go to the train station when you get a chance, when you go to Boston next, and you will actually find discoveries of Nobel laureates, innovations of Nobel laureates carved on the train stations. You see, for an innovation to flourish, it has to be not only top down, but bottom up. Recently, I was in New Delhi on the 16th of Jan for the Startup India, Stand Up India event with Prime Minister Modi and Finance Minister. And I think the seeds have been sown to invest into R&D. India actually traditionally has not invested significantly into healthcare. We have seen that data in the statistics earlier, and all the more in R&D. Whereas if you look at basically what has happened in the West, the investment dollars that has gone into basic R&D and applied R&D has been much more. And then it is supported by an ecosystem of entrepreneurs, ecosystem of clinicians, scientists who basically work towards that problem. And I'll give you one example. I walked into the lab of Bob Howitz. How many of you have heard of Bob Howitz? Bob Howitz is a faculty of biology. He's a biology professor at MIT. Okay, so I walked into his lab and like a typical scientist, the lab was full of papers. It had cobwebs. Being MIT had no distinction. I thought actually some of the labs in India are much more fanciful looking than MIT labs, believe me. And but what was different about Bob was that he had got 150 patents on liver cancer, or basically 150 patents on different aspects of fatty liver cancer, so on and so forth. I asked Bob, why don't we basically start a company around some of your patents? So we picked up some of his patents. He said, look, I need money, and we need about $20 million to basically do these commercialization of some of the patents from the lab stage to the market stage. I put in some, I got some of my friends to put in money, and we raised $20 million at a valuation of about 25. We put in a great team of experts, entrepreneurs, clinicians, doctors, engineers to actually commercialize this innovation. And in about 3 years' time, we were able to sell that company to Pfizer for $350 million. Now, I couldn't have done that in India. When I actually started coming to India in 2002, 2003, I've been investing in India since 2002, 2003, I realized that Indian economy or Indian basic innovation ecosystem is more service oriented. So that's why you see mobile apps coming, you see basically service driven economies, you see basically a lot of startups. We are one of the biggest platform for startups. We have about 4,300 startups, out of which 10 of them are unicorns. And if you look at the unicorn, not a single unicorn in the healthcare space, most of them are basically in the service space. So we are not a product innovator per se, we are a process innovator. So we are one of the best. That's also traditionally, if you look at 50s and 60s, basically we historically have invested a good amount of money in chemistry, in physics, but not in biology. So there are so many basically permutations and combinations. And today to come up with a new molecule, you require a lot of money. In fact, statistics tell us that you require millions of dollars to come up with new molecule from the lab to the market. So Indian basic R&D is at flaw. And I think the reason for that is historic, but now the seeds of change are being sown. So I see a lot of investors coming forward to change this. But in the healthcare space, there are not many life sciences investors or healthcare investors like what you get to see in the US or in Europe. So you still have some investors, but not a lot, not to the kind of what you want to basically produce, a molecule to come out of. I used to work very closely with Dr. Reddy. I'm a shareholder in Dr. Reddy Laboratories, market cap $6 billion plus. So I invested in Dr. Reddy's when the market cap was $1 billion. I invested $200 million in Dr. Reddy's through my fund. And I realized that even a company like Dr. Reddy's has not come up with its own molecules then, at that point of time. Now it has come up, but not at that point of time. So they were trying to work on an insulin molecule, which was basically didn't go through beyond phase 3 because the risk of attrition is very high. So how do you minimize the risk of attrition? You got to have lots of capital. You got to have lots of, that ecosystem has to be built. It has to be top down and bottom up. We're not there as yet when it comes to coming up with our own biotech molecule, which is innovative, right from lab to the market. It will take some more time.
Can you pass on the mic, please?
Hey, my question is specific to Anand yourself, because I want to know a view from an investor point where we are not into the healthcare, we are into the online business, and it is not an innovation, but it is my thought process is in line with what Madam Lakshmi was talking about. She was taken as pledge on the movie industry bringing a cultural change, right? It has to come, but what we do is taking that as an online business, where today all the products have come online and all this business is flourishing, but the gap is where the rural cultural items, it is not reaching the right people where they require, right? So we have made a little bit of breakthrough with our capability so far, and as from an investor point of view, they are looking for innovation and technology kind of thing. It doesn't fall under the category, but it is one thing which we have to bring the cultural value up into it. So how do you view this? How is our chances? Because see, it is like whenever we go.
I got your question.
Yeah.
So basically, you see, the thing is, out of my 60 investments that I've made in my life so far, I invested in 4 startups founded by Nobel laureates, and I lost money in 3 of them. So to make money, you don't have to be a Nobel laureate. That's the first lesson I learned. It doesn't matter whether your company technology is high-tech or low-tech. What matters is, do you actually know what I was telling earlier is, do you actually know what the problem is, and are you coming up with a solution which is the right solution? Now in your case, if I were you, what I would do is that, I have Madam Lakshmi in front, right? So I would actually use her influence to basically come up with a video product or a video film or an animated film of your products and connect you with maybe media channels to see how we can come up with a TV show. In fact, actually now I'm coming up with a TV show on women entrepreneurs. Women entrepreneurs who are not known in the industry. And I have come up with 25 women entrepreneurs from Asia who basically are like you and me. Like, because in my life, my inspiration has been my mother. And to me, she's the best women entrepreneur I've come across in my life even now. And so I have seen that there are so many examples, beautiful examples, who are not being highlighted. So what do you do to highlight those women entrepreneurs? What do you do to highlight the products made by entrepreneurs like yourself? And use social media, use, I would say, channels, media channels in the right manner. If you come up with a right solution and a right description or a right business plan, now in our language it's called the business model and the business plan, I think you will definitely hit your target or your goals. You know, keep your goals realistic.
Yeah.
Don't say that you want to make money, which is basically something unrealistic. Make something which is the realistic goal, work towards it, and then little drops of water will make an ocean.
Right. And, sorry to interrupt, to answer your question, we have made inroads on media because the media, looking at our concept, has carried out articles, in medias like Times of India, Indian Express, and, Headlines Today have made interview with us, and Big FM has made interview with us. It is with a little, a little bit of exposure which we have. They have come to and approached us because our concept was new. Okay, so from that angle only this question arises. So,
Yeah. So that is one. The second is come up with a mobile app, a crowdsourcing platform. Today, to be successful as a startup, you got to marry the new innovative technologies, new innovative business practices with the traditional ones.
We are already in the process.
Come up with a mobile app, both on iOS platform as well as Android platform, and let the mobile app be campaigned by someone who is good looking. I mean, to be realistic. I mean, to be beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder, but somebody who is a striking face comes on right on the mobile app. People are bound to go into that website, spend some more time, and see what exactly is there in the product. Now, if your products, okay, you don't have to tell you're good, but somebody else speaking about your product, and that somebody else happens to be a good face or a responsible face, socially responsible face, need not be basically the next, big movie actress, but someone who is socially responsible, pleasant, and knows what exactly she's speaking about can make a difference. And recently I was going through an article about how Facebook picked up the picture of a photograph of a woman, of a lady who was lighting a diya, and in Bangalore, and she's from Bangalore, and so the husband was clicking her photographs, put it on Facebook, Facebook picked it up and became like a national or an international, I would say, slogan. So we have to think of innovative practices to make our business model and business plan successful. So the new mantra for being successful is not globalization, is glocalization. 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 How can we basically be global but yet local?